Alright, welcome back to the shop. We're finally painting the boat. Yay! It's only been a long time. I don't even know how long, but too long. So here we are, boat sanded. Before we get started, there's a few things I want to say. This is not a show boat. This boat is for fishing, utility. It's a work boat. It's to take out fishing, diving, whatever we decide to do with the boat. That's what the boat's for. So this is not a show boat. I did not sand this boat till it's so smooth that you can't sand anymore. I mean, I just went over this boat with a sander. Whoever fiberglassed it originally just did a fiberglass job on it with blue fiberglass. I mean, this boat has not been sanded smooth, and I do not want to invest the time to sand the boat to show condition smooth. So it's going to be just like most boats out in the ocean fishing today. They're not perfect. So that's something I wanted to say. I have all my products ready to go over there. So far, I've sanded the boat with an Orbital sander. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm going to show you. Orbital sander. I used 80 grit sandpaper, and I sanded the whole boat. 80 grit, pretty aggressive. Probably should have been sanded with something finer again before it's painted, but like I said, I'm just painting the boat so it's a nice color. I'm not too worried about getting a perfect finish or anything, so I think it's gonna look just great. I'm going to be putting a primer surfacer down, and then I'm going to be painting the boat blue. I plan to put a white stripe or insert or two-tone, or I'm not exactly sure what yet, but eventually I'm going to do a white something on the boat, some sort of accent. But today it's probably just going to end up blue if we get lucky. It might end up just in primer, I don't know yet. So the whole boat's been washed with water and then dried with a dry cloth and then wiped with reducer to get any oils or anything like that off of the surface, so it doesn't make your paint look funny or not stick or bubble or whatever. I've got the surface as clean as I could, and then I dried it again. And before we paint it, I'm going to go over it with a tack cloth, which is just basically a sticky cloth to get any dust or anything that might have stuck on there since I washed it a few minutes ago. So we'll be doing that. I'm going to mix the primer first so it's all ready. Then I'll tack it off, and then we're going to spray the primer on with my HVLP Finish Line paint gun. This is not an expensive paint gun. This is a paint gun that I've had for years. I've painted anything from cars to boats to race cars. It's painted a lot of things, and it's been good to me. So we're going to paint the boat with it. Using a Proform 2K high build primer surfacer, sealer, all in one. It's kind of a universal product. It's mixed at a 4:1 ratio, so that's 4 parts primer to 1 part urethane hardener, and they say that you can reduce it to get a nicer finish, so I'll probably put a little reducer in it just so she comes out a little better. And then they say on the can, make sure whatever product you're using, you follow your manufacturer's recommendations. But these ones, it's 30 minutes for a top coat, so half hour we can hammer paint on it. Hopefully it says that the temperatures vary. Right now it's a pretty nice day out here, but I don't know how humid it is or anything like that, so we're just gonna try it, see what happens. Nothing to lose. So I'm gonna get to mixing the paint. I'm gonna double check my mixing ratios on the back of the can, then I'll mix up the paint, and then we'll try to get a few shots of me painting. It's gonna get pretty hazy in here. Another thing I want to mention is this is not a recommended practice to paint something with a paint gun in a garage like this with no ventilation. I mean, these products are dangerous. Do this at your own risk. I'm aware that this is a risk. I'm aware this is bad for my health. I don't need anybody to tell me. I'm well aware of all the consequences. Somebody goes to do this at your own risk. I mean, I am not saying this is okay to do, you know. This is something I definitely don't want you to think it's okay. If you want to take the chance and do it, personal choice. I'm doing it. I want to paint my boat. I've painted lots of things in my life, and I've done it both in paint booths, garages, barns. I've painted in just about anything, and I'm comfortable with doing it. So yeah, just a little safety thing I wanted to put in there. I'm not saying this is okay to do. Do as I say, not as I do. And for the 4:1 mix, I don't have a mixing stick with 4:1 on it. I don't have a scale, so I am going to simply guess at what a 4:1 mix ratio is. I've done this quite a few times. I have a rough idea. It turns out for me every time. Again, the proper way to do this is get yourself a mixing cup with the 4:1 ratio on it. This one does not have it. This is not for this. This is a mixing cup that I made. It doesn't have any valid markings on it. Yeah, but you can buy them. They didn't have them at the store, or I would have bought one. So I'm just taking my chances. I'm gonna mix her up at what I think a 4-to-1 ratio is. I'm gonna give this a stir because these high build primers have a lot of stuff in the bottom, and that's the stuff you want on your boat, not in the bottom of the can. So if you have to spend a few minutes giving your primer a good stir to get all that stuff mixed in, I highly recommend doing it because the product does not work very good without having the fillers mixed in with it. So I'm going to take the time to stir my primer. It's going to take a few minutes. Alright, I'm ready to mix up this paint and get at her. I've stirred this very thoroughly. Mix up this primer, I guess is what I should have said. I feel like that's a little overkill, so I'm going to pour a bit back. Like I said, this is my own method of mixing, not necessarily a recommended practice. This, I'm not sure I'm going to bother with the reducer. This looks pretty thin to me, so I'm going to try spraying it without the reducer. If it's not laying down nice, I'll reduce it a bit. Anytime it looks thin, don't thin it more. Try it first and go from there. If it's not coming out nice, it's not laying down smooth, then you can thin it a bit, but don't thin it first because you can't go back, right? Always try it. I'm going to leave that sit for a minute while I get my tack cloth out. As I mentioned earlier, all this is a sticky rag. You open it, always stretch it like this to open up the little pores inside there. As you can see, it kind of has little pores in the cloth, and you always stretch it, and that way it picks up the dust better, they say. So I was taught, and I always fold it in half kind of, but never solid. You kind of want it scrunched. And then you just take and simply wipe down the entire boat with this. Not something you have to wipe for hours. You just simply rip over the surface that you're going to paint. Applying a little bit of pressure, but you don't need to get carried away. And you can see it taking off dust, dirt, schmag, whatever. And this here you can see is kind of different looking. All I did is took some fiberglass resin and I brushed it on the body filler on the area I replaced because I don't want it to look too smooth. I was kind of trying to match the texture of the rest of the boat so it's not quite so obvious where to repair it. So that's all that is. If anybody's wondering, I just brushed a little bit of resin on there last night. Sort of give it the texture I was looking for. This, there's nothing really more to say. I'm just wiping the boat down as demonstrated earlier with a tack cloth. And I do this anytime it's dry. So if my primer's dry, before I put my base coat on, I'll tack it again. But if it's sticky or whatever, then I won't. So only do this when you're dealing with the completely dry surface at the beginning of your paint job or whatever. Alright, I feel like that's tacked. So I'm going to get my paint gun hopping here. Now this is going to get interesting. Always pour your paint through a strainer. That's what I got here. And it catches all the gross shit that you do not want in your paint job. You can buy those at your local paint supplier too. I use Napa Auto Parts. You can use whoever you got in your area or whoever you're used to using, but that's where I get these. They're a couple bucks a piece and well worth the investment in my opinion. You can use it for one product, so the whole time I'm priming, I'll use the same strainer, and then when I go to paint, I will switch to a different strainer. You don't want to overfill your paint gun either. That's about as full as I like to go. Again, a proper mask, highly recommended. This is not a proper mask. You want to be using something with charcoal filters to arrest all the chemical and whatnot. Pressures. Recommended spray pressure for this is about 18 pounds, so that's where I'm setting my gun. I often change my gun. I have my own preferences for spraying. It's not always 18 pounds, so go with the recommended, but after you get experienced, you may find pressures that you like more for certain products. In my opinion, nothing wrong with it. Right, I'm gonna stretch out my hose here, get all my tangles out of it so I'm not fighting with it. while I'm painting. So there you go. I got my hose was able to reach all the way to the back, what I wanted. So yeah, I'm gonna start back here and work my way to the front. And I don't like the way it's going on. It's kind of dry. I may have to reduce it. I'm gonna try a little more pressure first. Oh yeah, that's better. Still pretty dry though. I may end up having to reduce it.